Yep. So thanks very much, folks, for joining. We're just going to give the new, give a few minutes for some other people to join too, because we do have a lot of registrations for the webinar. So I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to even catch the beginning. So. Perfect. We got some people still coming, so give another minute or so. All right, so I think we'll get her started. So my name is Steve Schock. I'm the VP of Marketing with Novatech, and I wanted to thank everybody for attending this Digi webinar. I'm sure other people will be poking in with time because we have a lot more people than this registered. Um, so without further ado, I'd love to hand it over to Andy from Digi, who's going to be taking us through a great presentation on how Digi's product portfolio serves all the needs in the transportation and utility space. So over to you, Andy.
Great. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for attending our session today. As Steve mentioned, we're going to be focusing a bit today on some of our Digi solutions as it relates to the transportation and utility segments. Before we do that, though, I want to give a quick introduction on some of the folks that you may interact with here at Digi. I'm Andy Vallejo. You can see my picture there on the screen. I'm our strategic program manager here at Digi. But part of the larger team that you may interact with as well is Jen Klein. She's our global director of our channel program, B.A. Ray, Alex Martinoff, Amir, and Chrisanne. They're all members of our team, so you may have already worked with them, and if not, you probably will soon, but you can reach out to any one of us if you need any assistance, anything related to Digi, so happy to help you. And all of you will get a copy of this deck when we're done, so you'll have our contact information as well.
So Andy, sorry, Andy, this is Steve here. I don't seem to be on the second slide yet. I still seem to be on the title slide.
Okay, let me kick back and try again. Not moving. I'm going to stop sharing and then restart again and see if that may help us here. I appreciate you letting me know. Thank you. Okay. Hopefully this will get you onto that second screen.
Perfect. Yep, on the second screen now. Yep.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So again, you will have this information for you when we're done, and let's get into this. So onto this next slide for our agenda. We're going to briefly talk about Digi and who we are. We're going to go over our cellular product lineup, those solutions that best fit into these segments. We're going to talk about a few use cases on how your customers may be using our solutions and how they may use them in the future. We're going to talk about why Digi. We understand that there's a lot of competition out there, and that's always a question we get is why would we choose you over someone else? And then lastly, we're going to focus a little bit on a newer solution that we have in our portfolio called WAN bonding that we think you'll find pretty exciting, and we know our customers love it, so hopefully yours will as well. Okay, so moving on, who is Digi? Well, Digi is an IoT company. We've been around for quite a number of years, since 1985. We're traded on the NASDAQ Stock Exchange. We're headquartered in the US in Hopkins, Minnesota, but we provide many IoT solutions to your customers. They could be in the form of embedded modules and gateways. So think of customers that design and produce electronic equipment where they want a radio module built in. They buy those modules from us and then they insert it into their hardware. We also sell cellular routers and networking devices. And that's what we're going to focus on a lot today, because this particular customer segment typically buys the units that are already pre-configured and made up directly from the manufacturer. We offer software and services. We cover a lot of different segments with these that we'll talk about in another slide, but everything from management software to control and monitor, configure our devices, to one of our divisions is called SmartSense, even allows your customer to track temperatures and monitoring statuses of refrigerated compartments. So think of trucks or grocery stores where they have refrigerators and freezers where temperature being within a certain range is very critical. We also have professional services groups within our organization that can help your customer with those wireless design services and even app development. So we do a lot, and we're going to talk about a few of those areas today, but that's who Digi is. Again, been around quite a long time and been very successful in this space. So let's move on to this next slide. This touches just at the surface some of these segments that we support and we sell to, and some of those customers that we do business with. You'll see there's a lot of categories here. We've got the energy segment, Exxon and Chevron. We have smart cities and transportation. One of our really good customers is the New York City Department of Transportation. We'll talk about them a little bit more. But we also work in the healthcare space, agriculture, industrial, retail, really you name it. We have a device that would be a good fit for any type of segment. Although we're going to focus on a couple today, we don't want you to forget that if you run across opportunities, think of us in other areas that maybe you didn't before. Okay. We're going to pause for just a second. We hope that you can help make this a little interactive and assist us in this presentation today. But we'd like to ask a poll, and if you could enter your answers in the chat box, that would be great, and we can review those. But the first question is, how familiar are you with Digi International's cellular portfolio? But really, have you sold us? Are you familiar? Have you seen it before, or is this going to be the first time you're exposed to it? So I'll give just a couple seconds for everybody to enter your response into the chat, and we'd appreciate it. And while you're doing that, I'm going to move on and we'll start talking about our next section. Our next section is going to be the Digi product lineup. So those devices, services, capabilities that you can deliver to your customer. I want to start with the Digi Remote Manager. This is really integral in the Digi solution, and every solution for that matter with Digi. It is your command center, your single pane of glass that your customer can access, monitor, control, and visualize their deployed units that they have out in the field. So if your customer has 500, 1,000, 10,000 devices, it can be very difficult to maintain and manage those many assets out in the field, if not impossible. Especially they may be geographically dispersed to the point where they might not even be able to physically touch every device once it's deployed. That's where Digi Remote Manager comes into play. It allows them to have visibility to all of those devices, make sure their firmware is up to date, scan for any security concerns, also configure and send profiles out to devices. So if you have one group of devices that need to be configured different than another, this can all be done via that single pane of glass with, we call it DRM. This by default is a cloud-based solution. So your customer just needs access to internet and a web browser. It can be done on a computer, a tablet, even a phone. So it's really easy for them to connect. But for those customers that maybe don't like cloud-based solutions, and we run into this into the utility space quite a bit, and even the financial segment, it really depends on the customer type, but they say, hey, maybe we're a little averse to cloud-based solutions. Well, great. We have a solution for you. We also have an on-premise solution. So this would sit behind the customer's firewall and give them many of these capabilities, but also, basically alleviate any concerns about their data being out in the cloud. So that's where everything rolls up into as a DRM. Just want to make sure you are aware of that, and it's a key component of our solutions.
So
Okay.
Andy, before we move
Yeah.
on, so just
Sure.
a quick roundup of the poll. So most people, this is their first time dealing with Digi, and we've got a small group of people that are moderately familiar. So for
Okay.
most people, this is the introduction to Digi.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. That's very helpful. We appreciate that. And hopefully you will come out of today with having some additional knowledge and some insight into who we are and how we can help you and your customers. So good feedback. Okay. So let's talk about our DigiCellular lineup. As you can see here, there's quite a few devices. Let me kind of break this down and make it relatively easy. So we have three, we call them series of devices, an EX, IX, and a TX. And the EX is our enterprise lineup. Think of these as devices that you would put in indoors, a carpeted environment, a branch office, a home, a retail location, somewhere where it's environmentally protected. Then you have an IX series, which stands for industrial. So those are more outdoor type focused. Not that you can't use any of these indoor, but this is where they're most popular. And why the IX is a very popular device outdoors is these are designed to operate in more extreme conditions. So outside you have temperature fluctuations, really low to really high. And so these are designed to withstand that. They're also very small in form factor because most applications in this space, these devices go inside of a NEMA enclosure, so a weather protected box. So think of it an intersection. You've got a traffic control box at basically every intersection in the country. And inside that box is typically a cellular router, like you would see here from Digi. You have some traffic control computers and monitoring hardware, and all of that fits inside that box. Well, because there's a lot of equipment in there, space could become an issue, which is why we've sized these very small and great form factor to fit inside those enclosures. And then lastly, we have our TX series, and the T is for transportation. So think of mobile, moving. Could be a car, a bus, a train, you name it. We actually do have customers, though, that buy our transportation devices and put them inside of stationary NEMA enclosures as well for traffic control. They do that because of some features that they're interested in, but again, not to say you couldn't use these in any application, but that's usually where customers start. Um, and so on that TX series, not only are they designed for those extreme temperature ranges, but other things like shock and vibration and dust, where think of a train. That's some heavy duty impacts that, going over rails and bumps and harsh environments, and these things are specced out to work really well in those situations. So that's kind of a high level of the devices that we have. And within each category, you can go from an entry level device, like on the left, that may be 4G LTE capable, may have a serial connection and an Ethernet connection, bare bones and just basic. That's all your customer needs. All the way on up to, on the right end, we have devices that are 5G capable to take advantage of the latest and greatest, fastest networks. They may add Wi-Fi. They may add digital input capabilities in the form of the iX40. You name it, we really have a solution that will provide a great fit for your customers' needs. We're not trying to say, here's this one box that's really expensive and fits in every application. We'll basically put them in the product that's the best fit for them. So that's at a high level what our lineup is. Of course, if you need additional information on any of these, please feel free to reach out to us. We have that we can assist you with, as well as our website at digi.com has a wealth of information on all of these products. Okay. I want to get into managed services. So we just talked about the DRM, the Digi Remote Manager, and the hardware. Those are your base use cases where customers need wireless connectivity, and they typically buy the box from us, and then they install it themselves or they manage it themselves. They find a provider to order a SIM card, and they deal with, the technical support and troubleshooting and those type of things, which takes resources. It takes staffing. It takes expertise. But we at Digi also have a fully baked solution for a managed network as a service offering. So let me explain what this is. We're really excited here about this, and we have a lot of customers that are taking advantage of this. And what it is, it's a fully managed network as a service. So you may have a customer that comes to you and says, I'm going to pick an example. This is an easy one, an ATM company that puts cash machines in vending machine or in grocery stores or casinos or you name it. It can go anywhere, and they may come to you and say, hey, we have 1,000 locations where we need to get internet connection to complete these transactions, but we just don't have the expertise. We don't have the staffing to handle all of this. Can you help? And the answer is yes. We can provide an end-to-end support for these customers for any type of connection. Basically, they just need to tell us where they need the connection at and needs to be, and then we provide them the full solution that includes the hardware, the network configuration, the troubleshooting, the airtime, the tech support, the full stack, and we just deliver them a unit that they plug in, and then we support it 24/7. So it doesn't matter where the location is at, what type of location it is, and it doesn't even matter what type of connection it is. You'll notice here on the Manage Any Network, we have broadband, so that could be, typically we're talking fiber, cable or DSL wired connections. It could be cellular if they're in an area that doesn't have those. MPLS, it could be Wi-Fi, could be 5G connectivity, or even a combination of all of those that we can provide it. So I'm going to move to the next slide, and this may help bring it all together. And within the Digi portfolio, it's called Ventus, is the offering that we have. It's, again, managed network as a service solution. But we offer everything from the engineering. So we'll scope this out and help your customer design the network to the best that we can and fulfill their needs. We can provide the connectivity, and that's the actual hardware. We go out and we source the network as well. We say, hey, in this location, your best way to connect may be fiber, but it may be cellular, or maybe you want a primary fiber connection and a cellular backup. So we can do that too in the same box. We provide field services. So what I mean by that is we can actually do break fixes. We can go out and do installations, do repairs if need be. We have staff and teams to do that. I already talked about the hardware. We provide them a box that they just plug in and it works. There's no configuration on their end, no need for them to do anything else. We just provide it ready to go. And then support. We provide 24/7 and 365 monitoring, support, troubleshooting. Anything goes wrong, they call us, put in a ticket, and we take care of it for them. So we're essentially providing all of their IT staff knowledge and expertise from that. Monitoring, we proactively monitor our customers' networks to ensure there won't be any issues. And if we see any anomalies or things that may potentially cause problems, we will address those ahead of time. Again, almost like having, a dedicated IT staff looking at this. And security, same thing there. We're constantly updating firmwares, making sure everything is secure, blocking any threats, events. So long story short, as you can see, it's really an A to Z solution where this is billed as a service. So it's a monthly subscription, monthly recurring charge. So if your customer says, I have 5,000 locations, we need connectivity, we just charge them this monthly cost, and they've always got the most up-to-date hardware, up-to-date network, and they put it in the hands of the experts. So this is something that you can offer your customers as well. So I want to pause for a second because I know I talked about a whole heck of a lot here, and let that sink in a bit. Not only can we provide the bare bones routers and the connectivity to that, but again, we can provide the entire solution, including the connectivity as a monthly recurring charge to your customer. So we're super excited about it. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask now. I'll pause for just a moment. You can type them in, or you can come off of mute and we can help you there. And then I will take a quick drink while we do that. Okay, let's move on here. We have a second poll question. If anyone would participate here, we would certainly appreciate it, just like the first one. So here, the question is, what solution providers are you most familiar with in the transportation and utility space? So who are you either been selling your customers on already or already looked into? We know that most of you, Digi is relatively new, but who have you been focusing on up to date? That's really the question.
And then while people are answering that, Andy, a fellow had a question. What bands do our cellular devices work in?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So our devices are multi-band capable. So I won't go through all of them because it could take an hour, but our devices really have many frequency bands. And so we support all the major carriers in the area. In the US, it's the big ones. It's the Verizon and the T-Mobile and AT&T. And Canada, it's Rogers and TELUS and Bell. And so really our devices are certified to work on, a variety of carriers. And then depending on which specific device your customer needs, you may have, some that have, 10, 20, 30 bands that they operate on. So I would say that if you're concerned about a specific band, reach out to us and we can look at and find the best model that's a good fit. But the high level answer is we support many of the frequency bands, and in most cases, we're going to be able to fit your need.
Perfect, Andy. So a few people responded with the brands they work with right now. So we've got basically, so actually one person said Digi.
That's great.
Sierra Wireless, Microhard, and Cradlepoint are the ones that are coming up in addition to Digi.
Got it. Perfect. No, that's helpful. We appreciate that. And those are some of the regulars that we see in this space as well. So not a big surprise. Great companies as well. So thank you. Appreciate that. Very helpful. Okay. So let's get into the next section is going to be some use cases. So we know we're going to focus a little bit on the utilities, the traffic, etc. But on this slide, you can kind of see where we've broken out the type of opportunities that may be available. Now, this particular one is the US market alone, so it's even bigger when you start to pull in Canada, but there are thousands, if not millions, of connected endpoints throughout the regions. In digital signage, as an example, 1.9 million displays out there, and those displays could be, think of it on the side of a road, letting you know, there's a wreck ahead. those variable messages signs have to get changed, and somebody's not going out there and actually changing and programming the sign by hand. This is done remotely, and that has to be done in most cases through a wireless connection. Um, Power grids in the utility space. You have many transformers and substations and power plants that have to be monitored all the time. And that's typically done again via a wireless connection. So when you start looking at the overall opportunity, there are millions of endpoints out there that could be connected. So we just kind of show that to say that this is a big segment, and obviously why we're focusing on it a little bit. So let's get into some examples with our hardware. Excuse me. So we broke out the EX, IX, and the TX series. So let's talk about some things that your customers may be using today or may need to use. In the EX lineup, a very popular one is a branch office SD-WAN backup. So your customers have carpeted environments. They have branch offices and main offices and locations all around the country. Well, in many cases, these are connected with a fiber data connection as their primary internet source. But do they have a backup? Do they have a secondary or even a tertiary connection point if something happens to fail on that first primary connection? And that's where our devices are very popular, that they would take an EX device that has a SIM in it, obviously connecting to a cellular carrier, and they plug this into their SD-WAN network. And if the primary connection goes down, this is a failover that will automatically connect to the wireless connection and make sure they have business continuity. They don't lose that connection. That's a very simple but popular reason why customers are using some of our devices. Another one that comes in a lot, especially in the utility space, is this next one under facilities and security. Well, there's security cameras everywhere these days. They need to monitor expensive equipment that maybe is subject to theft or just from a safety standpoint. And a lot of these locations, think of a power plant or an oil rig or pumping station out in the middle of nowhere. They may not have a fiber connection or even any wired connection, but they still need to have that surveillance and security capability. And that's where the wireless component comes in handy. And especially our 5G devices that can take advantage of the faster network speeds, so they can stream live video. That's where it's a real key place where we can use our devices and tap into this particular segment. Going on to the IX, electric grid. Think of a recloser. So for those of you that may or may not be familiar with a recloser, but it is a device that's connected to the utility lines that allows it to be basically disconnected or reconnected in the time of like an emergency. So think of almost like a circuit breaker that you would have in your home, but it's a big, massive breaker connected to the larger utility line. And those reclosers are there for safety, but they can be controlled remotely from the IT folks or the operation folks that may need to. And how do those stay connected and how do they know they're operating efficiently? That's typically, again, a wireless connection. And that's where our IX series is a great fit. It can fit inside those enclosures up on a pole out in the middle of nowhere. And just another example of how our devices may fit into that particular use case. And then utilities, we have SCADA connections for sensors. There are millions of SCADA connections out there in the oil and gas space, the utility space, and those could be anything from a sensor checking water levels to checking flow rates to checking temperatures, but they need to get that data back and forth, and that's where our devices again can fit in to this larger ecosystem. And that's a great way to tap into that data is through those wireless connections, excuse me, using a Digi device. Let's go into the TX series and how we might use these.
Before you go there, one sec, before
Yes.
you go there, so we had a fella ask a question just to make sure the on-prem solutions for all these devices, can the management of the devices be an on-prem solution, or does it have to be cloud?
So the customer has their choice. So our cloud-based solution is typically what we sell. I'll just say 95+% of our customers go that route. But for those customers that don't want to or can't go cloud-based, they can use an on-prem solution. Yes. So it's an either or based on their needs.
Perfect. Thanks, Andy.
Okay, thank you. So lastly, let's talk about the transit space. So let's look in the lower right-hand corner, public transportation. Digi is really big in this space. And our devices are on thousands of trains and buses and streetcars around the country. And an application and a use case may be this. You see here we have a light rail. Well, on the light rail, you have two types of customers or endpoints using data. You have the actual transit agency employees. So think of the light rail conductor, the drivers, you have maintenance staff. They need to have the ability to be connected, but you also have passengers. You have the public, you have the riders that are on these trains and light rails every day. So we have a TX line of our series, again, the transportation series. I'll give you an example, the TX64 device. This has actually two cellular radios built into it. And I bring this up because the two cellular radios in the device allows your customer to have two concurrent cellular connections going at the same time. So you ask, well, why would you do that? Well, let's talk about that. So let's say you've got one SIM in the first radio, and that's under a Rogers SIM plan, cellular plan. The customer may say, well, I want this cell plan with Rogers to only be used by our transit agency employees. So transmitting traffic data and people counts and fare collection, all the back-end business operations that you need to run a light rail. Great. But now they said we also want to provide Wi-Fi for our ridership. So the passengers, we don't want them sucking up all the bandwidth for our first SIM, because then we wouldn't be able to collect fares and monitor our equipment and so on. It would degrade the performance. So we're going to give them a second SIM with, could be a second Rogers SIM, it could be a TeleSIM, it could be a Bell SIM. And that data connection will now be segmented off just for the passengers to use for their Wi-Fi. So that's just one application where you can have multiple SIMs, multiple independent data connections, and just segment them out where you need. But that's a very popular use case in our space, where one goes to the passengers and the other goes to the back-end operation. So that's a kind of a high-level, sophisticated example. But another one on the lower left-hand corner, real basic. You've got fleet vehicles out there, service vehicles. So all of these, let's say utility customers, the electric company, they've got service trucks, tens of thousands of them driving out there. They need to be in constant communication as well to get new updates and orders and transmit status of work repairs. We have a TX40 device. It's a nice 5G device that provides basic connectivity for a very affordable price to your customer. They may not need these dual SIMs and other capabilities that you would need in the really advanced public transit space, but they still need solid, reliable, fast connectivity. And that's just another example of having one of our devices in those vehicles to make sure they stay connected. So those are just a few examples of of some of the use cases. So hopefully that was helpful for you. I'm going to go into two a little more detailed use cases here to expand, and then we'll pause again for some questions. TriMet. TriMet is a great customer of ours. They're in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle area in the US, and they are using our TX64 devices to connect all of their transit vehicles with. And I mentioned some of them, it's light rail and trains and buses, etc. And what they've done is they were modernizing their system to bring it up to speed to take advantage of what we call TSP. It's a Transit Signal Priority Initiative. And where this comes into play is these buses and the sophisticated equipment on them with sensors, et cetera, can actually communicate with the lights throughout the city. And so the system knows, using the GPS location and identity of the bus or the light rail, that if this bus is driving down, I'm just going to fictitiously pick Main Street, and it's going 20 miles an hour, that it helps make sure that the signals, the traffic lights, are green for the bus when it comes through. So basically, it's ensuring that the route is clear for the bus, and so it gets through very efficiently without delay. And of course, nobody likes delays, especially when you're when you're on the bus and you want to get somewhere in time. But that's a sophisticated process, a lot of complex calculations that have to take place here. And our Digi solution is part of that overall solution to help make that happen. And so they've won many awards throughout their transportation district on how well they've done and how efficient they've become. And they can do a lot of great things, but the Digi solution, including our Digi Remote Manager, helps them maintain that very reliable network. And it's been a great win for them. And I do want to point out that they also utilized our professional services capabilities. So we help them write custom applications and scripts that can reside on the router itself to help make this process happen. So a great example there. Excuse me. This last one I want to point out is Electricity's company. They're in North Carolina. I bring it up because it's not your traditional utility company direct. Electricities actually is an organization and a company that provides technical support to other utility companies. So it's like a second layer here. So utility companies need help doing the things that they do. So think of it almost like a subcontractor in essence. That's probably dumbing it down a little too much, but I bring it up because they need assistance to maintain connections and efficiencies and assistance. And don't just think very small. And if my only opportunity is ABC Electric Company or 123 Electric Company, it's the businesses and organizations that work with these companies as well. So you kind of start spreading out, and there's many customers and many opportunities that you can tap into here. Okay. If you want to read more, we have many case studies and use cases that you can see on our website. So again, we'll provide this deck to you, and you can read up on this, and kind of talks about some other segments as well, and other applications. So we'll get this out to you. Okay, so before I go into this, I'm going to pause for a second and see if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, you could just, if you have questions, you could just put them in the chat, and then we'll either get them now or as Andy's talking.
Okay, great. Let's move on. So why Digi? We mentioned some other solutions and customer or competitors out there that you've already dealt with, Sierra and Cradlepoint, et cetera. Great companies. They also provide some solutions, but we get asked, why would we position your solution over them? And if you look at one thing, like Oh, you both provide routers. Great. Well, our routers do A, B, and C, and their routers probably do A, B, and C, and it's hard to differentiate. But really, when you look at the big picture, we do a lot of things that some of the competition isn't doing, including some of those two that I just mentioned. For example, I want to point out a couple things. I highlighted in blue here WAN bonding. I have a section we're going to talk a little bit more on, but this is the ability to take multiple data connections and combine them and make a faster data connection. Add redundancies into your customer's network resiliency plan. Um, those companies aren't doing this. This is something that there's only a couple in the industry that are offering WAN bonding. So that's a differentiator. I highlight private networks, CBRS ready. So those of your customers that may happen to be deploying their own private networks, our devices support those private networks, those band 48 CBRS capabilities. This is getting very big and very popular in the utility space, where customers want to manage their own network. They don't want to pay the big carriers those monthly fees. So we support that. Also want to point out SureLink. SureLink is something that we do that we're very proud of, that it allows your customers, when they're troubleshooting their connections, to help ensure that that data uptime is very high, that they're not losing data connections very often. And what it is, it's logic and programming built into our hardware that allows you to automate many troubleshooting steps that with some other customers may be a manual process if they're purchasing from a competitor. So I'm going to give you an example. The transit space, a public bus. We had a customer that was not using our hardware prior to this. They are now, but they had a competitive product, and this bus was running into an area of town where there's a cellular dead spot. And every time they crossed, I'll just say this intersection, they lost connectivity. Well, that wouldn't be horrible because they knew when they got to the next block, the signal would come back up and they'd be okay. But the problem was when they drove back into cellular connection, the router was not reestablishing the data connection. It stayed disconnected. And what had to happen was they had to manually go and reboot the router each time that happened in order to make it work. That's a big pain in the rear end. And can you really expect the bus driver to have the technical expertise to start doing that type of troubleshooting? It may be a simple switch to flip in one case, but it may involve disconnecting cables and doing other things. And they were losing a lot of time. They'd have to take the bus essentially offline in order to bring it back up because they didn't want to impact the riders here. And so that was a major hassle. And so with Digi SureLink, we can build automations into the device itself that says, if you lose connection for, I'll just pick something, say 30 seconds or more, you need to retry to reconnect. And if you still can't reconnect after, say, 2 or 3 attempts, the device will automatically try to reset the radio. So it'll kind of automatically do that reset that maybe they had to do manually. If that doesn't work, go to the next step. You may do a reboot of the actual router itself. And so you go through these progressions of steps that when the customer switched to our device, made it seamless and automatic, that they didn't have to worry about it anymore. And that was all pre-programmed and done ahead of time. The dead space was still there. It wasn't going away. But now, if it didn't reconnect on its own, the device automatically went through that sequence to ensure there was maximum uptime. So that's something that comes in very handy in this space. So those are just a couple examples of why Digi. There's a lot of things up on this slide that I haven't necessarily talked about, but when you bring them all together, we offer a lot more than the competition does. And one thing that I'll point out that we've already spent a lot of time on was those fully managed network as a solution offering. There's not a lot of competitors out there that are also offering that capability. So we really can do A to Z. And your customer can benefit from having one place to source a lot of their needs from. Okay. Time for one more and last poll question. So again, we appreciate your participation. What key differentiators would you like to see in order to better position Digi Solutions? So I know we've talked about a lot of things, and maybe these are things that you weren't aware of before, but is there something that you think is missing in the Digi portfolio that your customers need? Or is there something that you've been hearing a lot from your customers about that maybe nobody is offering? Just kind of looking for what you're seeing in the field. Obviously, you guys are the feet on the street and you're closest to the customers, and we'd love to hear what your take is there.
So Andy, we've got somebody asking for low standby power for solar applications.
Oh yes, we absolutely have that. So our iX30 device, excuse me, is a low power, under a watt of standby power usage for that. So yes, and that falls in, again, that IX category, and that is a very popular application. So great question, thank you.
And then how about programmable I/O and relay contacts?
Yes, in fact, that iX30, that same device does have programmable I/O, analog and digital contacts built in, yes. So that's great if your customer needs to hook up to, say a temperature sensor or a flow meter or something to trigger some other event. So we have that as well, yes.
Yeah. So a lot of good questions here. So we're asking about 5G SA support and obviously NB-IoT kind of low speed stuff.
Yeah, so 5G SA support, yes. For example, like our EX50 device supports SA, our TX40. So not all of the lineup, of course, it has to be a 5G capable device, which we have many of, do support the standalone 5G frequencies. But I'll be honest, it's most dependent on the carrier and what requirements they have, and or if they've even launched the 5G SA capabilities. So that's getting into a lot more technical details. So please reach out to us and we can help track that down for your individual case.
Right. And then what about NB-IoT?
NB-IoT, I need to follow up on that one. On that one. So that'll be something that I'll have to follow up, and we'll get that out to the group. Okay. All right, just looking at time, I've got about 11 minutes, so I will zip on. Sorry, I tend to get chatty when I go through these. So WAN bonding. I want to spend a little bit of time on this because this is pretty cool stuff. So I talked about connecting multiple data points into one data stream. So here's where this comes into play. This is an additional add-on. It's an optional add-on to our Digi devices that you can take up to 4 different data connections and combine them into, let's just say, one fat data pipe for your customer to utilize. And it could be a wired data connection. It could be a cellular data connection. And on some of our devices, I mentioned it before, example, our TX64 has 2 cellular modems. You can combine those 2 separate data connections that are cellular via WAN bonding as well. And so why would you want to do this? That's really probably the big question here. So I move to this next slide so you can see this. There's a couple reasons. The most popular one that we find is WAN aggregation. And with WAN aggregation, this is essentially combining the bandwidth of those separate data connections to make a larger bandwidth data pipe. So let's say your customer they're in an area where I'm going to pick some numbers here. They're only getting like 10 megabytes of speed, which is not a ton. It might be enough for video applications with one carrier, but maybe another carrier has a 20 megabyte speed capability. They could put two SIMs in our TX64 and bond those, and theoretically you could have 30. You add those, a 30 megabyte pipe. Now I do want to point out there is some overhead loss when you combine this, so you can expect about a 20% ballpark loss in speed when everything is said and done, because you do lose a little bit in translation here. So it may not be 100%, 20 plus 10 gives you 30, but the ultimate end result here is you have a faster data pipe that will help you with those more intensive data applications like video transmission and whatnot. That's one example, a very popular one, but there's some others that are just as important. The hot failover is really key, especially in the utility space. With the hot failover, what this does is you've got two separate data connections. In this example that we just gave with the TX64, two cellular data connections, and your bonded tunnel basically never goes down. It never loses connectivity unless you lose both connections. So if one carrier, let's say the TELUS data SIM goes out of coverage and you lose connection there, the Bell SIM is still up and running. Your end customer doesn't see that. They don't know that because their bonded connection is still maintained. So the only time you would actually lose data connection is if you lose both of those SIM connections. So this helps to ensure that you reduce the downtime in those types of scenarios. So those are two very popular ones. There's also packet duplication, where if it's mission critical, you can actually send the data over two separate paths. It's the same data being duplicated on two routes. So that helps ensure, again, that it ultimately gets to where it needs to be. But there's a lot of different applications here with this WAN bonding, but it's a great way to, help your customer in those types of situations where it just isn't the one SIM and one carrier solution may not be a great fit, but we can do this and add it again onto our devices and really add that value add. I already talked about this from a bonding solution to do redundancy and sending the data over two separate paths. That's where it's really key here in the oil and gas utility space, where they can't afford for those connections to go down. And so in many cases, they duplicate those packets and that delivery to help ensure that they don't have those issues. And then in public transportation, where this is big, is I talked about providing Wi-Fi to the riders of that light rail. Well, what if one SIM doesn't have enough bandwidth to spread amongst, let's say you've got 20 people on a bus? You can see how that could easily be chewed up, the bandwidth of one SIM. Another application is you can put one of our TX64 devices in the bus, two SIMs, double your bandwidth, and then be able to provide that to your riders via the Wi-Fi. So that's just another way you could use that bonding application. Okay, I'm going to try to wrap it up here since we're running out of time. Give a second for questions. This is really relevant for the US, but I wanted to point it out that all of our cellular devices are FIPS 140-2 certified. This is important when dealing with the US federal government, that they require some higher levels of certification, and we have this capability on all of our cellular devices. It's something that can be enabled if necessary. So I don't know how often it comes up, but I did want to point it out that we've had this recently, and it's kind of a big deal when working with government agencies, especially defense and law enforcement. And then lastly, we've talked about WAN bonding already. Want to talk about containers. I mentioned TriMet and using custom applications on our devices. We have the ability to do containerized applications as well, right at the router level. And this is where our professional services team can help your customer deploy custom applications right at the router level that can help improve efficiencies, cost savings, et cetera. But that's something that is available and built right in the capabilities into our devices, as well as lastly, a mobile VPN. For those customers that need a VPN that's built and designed for the mobile environment, we have the ability to load that right at our router level as well. So again, it's an application that's run on the device, and we can really provide all those things that your customer may be looking for. They don't have to go to one company, two companies, three companies to provide the things they need. They can come to just us to provide all of them. And that's just another example of how we differentiate ourselves over the competition. Not all of our competition can do all of the things that we can do. Okay. So I know we just got a few minutes, so that is the end of my presentation. So I'm going to open it up for any follow-up questions we might have.
We still have some participants on. On behalf of Novatech, I definitely want to thank you, Andy, for joining us today, and all the participants. If anybody does have any last-minute questions, you can ask here. Of course, you've got a few options for outreach. You can, most people on this call have a Novatech representative, so you can, start with a Novatech representative, or you obviously feel free to contact Digi as well. Like Andy said, dearth of obviously tons of information in this digital age on both of our websites. The digi.com website, you can find all the products, and then obviously pricing and quantities and whatnot you can get on the Novatech site too. So
yeah, we appreciate that. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for giving us your time. I know that this was new to a lot of you, so we hope there was some useful information. It's hard to pack everything in on such a short time, and I know we basically took up the entire hour. So thank you so much. We definitely appreciate that.
So we got a good question here too. I don't know if you can answer it too much, Andy, but lead times. I think if we talk, so lead times. I mean, are there products that are in stock more often, and do we want to talk about products that are not as in stock less frequently, or more infrequently, I guess you would say?
Yeah, that's a that's a good question, especially in the day and age that we are, and going through the last few years with with stock availability. We are in pretty good shape. I'll say for most of our stock, there are some devices, like I'll give you an example, our EX50 devices. This is our flagship 5G indoor device. We've got plenty of stock of these guys. No issues there. We try to ramp up production and availability to those devices where we're seeing the most demand. If to say that if you come to me with a device that we don't sell too many of, that we don't stock a lot of, that there may be some additional lead times for those. But for the most part, we've got pretty good lead times, and we can provide things within a week or two, and out to a couple months depending on what it may be. But we really have to get specific on that particular SKU to give you real firm numbers. But I will say that for the most part, we've got stock availability for almost everything, and it's typically not too long of wait times, if any.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and please share if you have forecast with your sales reps at Novatech. We can make sure that Novatech is stocked for you proactively. Also, we have a availability report that is shared with Novatech sales reps. So feel free to reach out to Novatech and checking availability. That's shared weekly.
Great, thanks, BA.
Exactly.
Okay.
Perfect. Well, Yep. So over to you. But I'd like to, again, like to thank everybody. Andy, thank you very much for joining. And we tons of good information. And like Andy said, I will be following up with a copy of this presentation so everybody can read it on their leisure. And we look forward to talking to all the participants soon.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank
thanks,
you.
guys. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.